Namaskar, Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi Achint. I have with me Mr. Kanwal Sibal. Sir, firstly, thank you so much. Namaskar and welcome to the show.
It's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Sir, I want to open up with Trump's reaction of how Trump and his team's reaction with the India-EU trade deal. I mean, they're basically crying foul here. Is that what you expected?
I'm a bit surprised that they should be taking such a view, but I can understand why they're doing that because they have been strategically outflanked. Look, Trump thought that imposing tariffs on India would force India to make the kind of concessions he wants on agriculture and dairy and things like that, because that is what is holding up the deal essentially.
Hmm.
Now, when we have done the India EU FTA, we've done the opposite of the strategy that Trump has followed. Let's say the EU has followed their strategy, that they have lower tariffs on India. Progressively, they'll go down to, not progressively when it is finalized after due legal vetting and all by next year, the duties will come down to zero. So it's just the opposite strategy. So
Hmm.
obviously they are miffed that Trump's use of tariffs as a weapon has been blunted by Europe when it deals with India by actually bringing down tariffs to zero on so many of the products. That is one. Uh, the other is that uh, in the India EU FTA, we have kept agriculture and dairy products out.
Yes, sir.
So Europe, therefore, has accepted our red lines and our sensitivities in this sector, precisely the areas in which the United States wants to force a hand. So it has been demonstrated to the international community that, and that's what also miffs him, that the United States and EU, Trump and Brussels are not on the same wavelength when it comes to the general issue of tariffs and using tariffs as a weapon, and with regard to India. So it exposes, if you like, Trump's error uh, in negotiating a trade deal with India by making the tariff issue the centerpiece of his strategy, and the agriculture and dairy sectors in India as ones that India has to yield on. So there is reason for them to be unhappy, yes, of course, because the message goes to the entire world.
That's there, sir. And one of the biggest things that I see is that they see it not as a betrayal from India, but they see it as a betrayal from the EU.
Yes, of course, because after all, there is this transatlantic solidarity. They are all part of the G7. They have had a shared economic and financial strategy. And basically, that strategy been until the G20 sort of got established was that they will govern the global financial and economic policies because of the weight they have in the international system. But now they are not on the same wavelength because Trump is also imposing tariffs, one-sided tariffs on Europe. And there is the other breach of solidarity relating to Greenland, for instance, as well as the Ukraine conflict, where Europe has a different view from United States. So, in a sense, they have to be more angry with Europe because Europe is now pursuing a declared policy of acting independently from United States on a whole lot of issues, trade, of course. See, they've had trade differences between them even before, so it's not a new thing. But now, on the larger strategy of dealing with the rest of the world, they are not on the same wavelength. And I suppose Trump and the people around him who have expressed contempt for Europe are not happy about Europe flexing its own geopolitical muscle.
Geopolitics aside, so Europeans want America to be engaged in Europe so that they can take advantage of that particular situation and negotiate or settle or play their Ukraine card. Americans seem to be not wanting to be engaged with the Russians, and that's something which is pretty evident with the now, funnily speaking, two separate national security policies that have come, which are diametrically opposite to each other. What do you see the Americans' perspective as far as Ukraine, Russia, and of course the European hand in it, sir? When you read these two policies, one is talking about complete withdrawal and going back into their hemisphere, and second is talking about a limited engagement within the Indo-Pacific and a cooperation sort of a arrangement with Russia.
Well, I don't know if one can reach that conclusion that they are going to withdraw totally to the Western Hemisphere. What they
Exactly.
are, to my mind, what their thinking and strategy is that the Western Hemisphere is ours. That's
Hmm.
it. Uh, China and Russia and other countries cannot enter this region and work against U.S. interests. So now that frees them from competition in their own hemisphere and then allows them to compete, confront, or whatever they want to do in the rest of the world. And the second order of priorities for them is the Indo-Pacific and China. Now, I think Trump realizes, and of course the people around him realize that they don't have the same capacity to uh, to deal with China as they have with, let's say, a country like India, because China has carved out for itself a uh, the capacities to retaliate in very sensitive areas. So United States has to engage with China, even if it seeks to curb China in every way possible that they can. Now, with regard to Europe, what they are saying, or what their thinking seems to be, is that Europe has benefited enormously from the security cover that US has given to them over the years, and Europe and United States has borne the large the most of the burden in terms of providing this security. Uh, and Europe now, therefore, and then Europe, because it didn't have to spend money on defense, they concentrated on developing their economic clout. And that economic clout they have used against the United States, and hence the deficit that the United States has with Europe. Therefore, they want to force them to spend more on defense, which will have another fallout, which suits the Americans, that if they spend more on defense, they'll buy more American arms. So, so they'll benefit in two ways. One, that they will reduce Europe's capacity to compete with them by forcing them to spend much more money on defense at the cost of so many other things on the economic side, uh, and also buy U.S. arms and bring more to the American kitty. And then at the back of their mind, I'm sure there is this calculation that if Europe spends much more money on its defense and develops independent capacities, that will be a plus plus for United States looking ahead in dealing with Russia, because United States will always be there with its capacities and its history, which it will not be able to shed, that Russia uh, is a major power, a military power, sitting on huge resources, can't be
Mm.
neglected, has to be challenged, and in some ways, even while Russia is engaged, it has to be curbed, just as in the case of China. You want to curb China, but also has to engage China. But the same thinking and strategy, but this time uh, there's another facet to this, that if Europe keeps on focusing on the Russia threat, it helps America to counter Russia. But if United States, if Europe decides that they have to reach out to China, as they are now doing, Carney has gone, or Starmer has gone, others will go and follow the lead, then it's a problem for the United States. Then actually, Europe is cozying up to China and undermining the US capacity to curb China. So this kind of a strategy or this kind of a situation doesn't apply to US relations with Russia.
Do you
In other
think?
words,
Sorry.
simplify this: the Europe's confrontation against Russia is a plus point in terms of curbing Russia, even as United States curbs reaches out to Russia. But Europe reaching out to China is a negative point when United States wants both to engage and to curb China.
Do you think this is a strategy to kind of put Europe in a place where somewhere down the line it will have to start engaging with Russia for in any some sort of a scenario
Well, there
where
are noises that are being made. Macron made that noise. Merz has started making that noise. Uh, the former German Chancellor, uh, you know, who
Angela
actually
Merkel?
who negotiated the Nord Stream pipeline. He has said very openly that it was a huge error to stop buying Russian gas and and destroy that relationship that was built between Germany and Russia. So there are these noises that are coming, but on the other hand, Europe has announced that they will now impose, I don't know what is the number of the sanctions that by 16,
20th
17, 18, 20th,
20th
or
sanction.
whatever round of sanctions on Russia. Number two, $90 billion of assistance to Ukraine, and then $800 billion for the next 5 or 10 years to Ukraine, accelerate the process of Ukraine joining the EU, uh, and then you see what the French have done of boarding Russian ship
Mm, mm.
in the Mediterranean, which has an Indian captain, as it happens. So this aggressiveness on sea to try and prevent Russia for selling its oil and using its shadow fleet to do so is a provocation. It's a clear provocation. So you have these two different kinds of, you know, thinking that is appearing in European circles. One, continue to confront Russia and support Ukraine, and also some noises that at the end of the day, as Merz said, Russia is a European country and you can't ignore it. You know, so I think there's lack of clarity about where Europe is heading with regard to Russia, because the European politicians have have you know put their foot into this in such a way that they can't extract themselves
Yeah.
from. Even the Danish Prime Minister, while she's been railing against Trump's desire to take over Greenland, she has also, you know, uh, repeated the narrative which is being propagated by the Americans that Russia and China threat to Greenland has also to be countered. And the French have also said, which surprises me, that some of the troops, a handful of troops that these countries have sent, this is not against America, it's against warding off potential threat from Russia.
Well,
So
China.
these are, yeah, contradictory noises that are coming. So Europe is in a bit of a fix, and when you are in a fix, you don't really have a very coherent line to take.
Yeah. When you look at Canada and the way Carney got up, two things that he did, I think, has gone really badly with Trump. One is the speech at Davos, and the second is the visit to China. Trump comes out and says 100% tariff on Carney, on Canada. And interestingly, today the Financial Times, and this is, I mean, Financial Times is supposed to be a reputed newspaper, says Trump administration had held covert meetings with French separatists from oil-rich Canadian province of
Alberta,
Alberta.
yeah, nice.
Now,
You're right. Mm.
if that's the reaction to an interaction or a state visit to China, will Europe want to take that risk?
Say it again.
If that's the reaction of the American establishment to contact with China, will Europe want to take that risk of China, sir?
Well, you've seen that Starmer has also gone to China with a
Yeah,
business delegation, and other countries will follow suit. Germany is, as you know,
we already
Germany's
did.
biggest partner is China, and they have suffered a great deal because of this confrontation with China as a result of the Ukraine war and everything else. So they may also make a move to see what they can do with China. So uh, I think, as Kani has said, that he's not interested in forging a trade deal with China. It is a limited kind of an opening towards China in order to increase their trade options and reduce their dependence on the United States. It's a signal to United States by both Canada and some European countries uh, that as part of their uh, strategic autonomy, if you like, as part of countering the American pressures on them on the economic side, they uh, will reach out to China and send a signal to the United States that if it continues pursuing this policy of exerting the kind of pressure that they're doing on Europe, then there could be a backlash which could harm U.S. Interests. So it's the point you're making is that how far will Europe go in terms of opening up to China in order to uh, address the problems they have with the United States? I think they can't go very far for two, three reasons. One is that there is a huge trade deficit with China. China is not allowing the US to European companies uh, to gain access to the Chinese market commensurately with the access China gets into the European market. They're also very worried about the uh, virtual monopoly that China has acquired in some of the frontier areas, uh, EV vehicles, for instance, critical minerals and technology, these rare earth magnets,
Yeah.
solar panels, and everything else. Uh, and if they increase their trade openings to China, then their industry, which has already been destroyed because China has built these capacities, will be destroyed even further. So they are in a dilemma. But China is, because it is not raising internal consumption, is still dependent on an strategy, strategy, and they have overcapacities. They have to, somehow find markets for these
Yeah. Yeah.
overcapacities. And Europe obviously is a huge market, which is why, they have turned to India, because India is a safer partner, and they can sell much more in the growing Indian market. So they have the export openings towards India, and India doesn't have the kind of capacities that China has to uh, trade in goods and in technologies which will undermine European industry manufacturing. On the contrary, in fact, European manufacturing industry will get openings in India without reciprocal dangers of the kind that China presents to Europe.
We see this pattern which is emerging, especially in the West, sir, that there's a lack of coherence between them. It was always the West. It was America and Europe, the Anglo-Saxon powers all together. It was always the West. Today, we are talking about them not as the West, but Europe, America, UK, Canada. At a strategic level, so what impact does that have?
Well, I think in many ways it has a lot of positive impact so far as the global south is concerned. One, because it will mean that the so-called hegemony of the West would actually have got will get diluted because they will not be able to have their way. After all, actually, it has happened a little bit as it is until
Mhm.
the financial crisis in 2008. It was G7 that was ruling the roost.
Yeah.
And then they discovered that they cannot handle the consequences of the financial turmoil that Western capitalism or American capitalism was facing unless they coordinated with other countries and stabilized the
Mhm.
financial situation in the world. And then the G20 got created. And G20, as you know, under the leadership of successful leadership of four developing countries, has developed an agenda which focuses on the interests and priorities
Of
of the
them.
global south.
Mm.
So already there is a dent in the Western hegemony. Uh, but if Europe and United States don't work together in so many international organizations, including climate change and everything else, it gives much more room to countries like India and others to be able to shape international discourse on the current problems of the day. So, in a sense, look, global south is not united either. So let's not get into that kind of an unrealistic assumption that global south is unified and can act, uh, cooperatively as a barrier to the West. So global south is divided, and now you find that the West itself is divided,
Divided.
United States and Europe. So but nevertheless, the reality of the divisions in the global south are long standing, it's nothing new. But the reality of divisions of the kind that we are seeing today between United States and Europe in the West is something new.
Yeah.
And we'll see how down the line
It
uh,
actually. Yeah.
how it pans out. But the reality is, from the India's point of view, it certainly makes us more important in the eyes of Europe, and hence, if you like, in large part, in a major part of the West, which then gives us room
Mm.
for maneuver.
Maneuver.
And for that, now the downside of this is this: that if United States and Europe begin to quarrel and have differences and there is no cohesion on their side, then many of the issues that are confronting the global South will be more difficult to resolve. Now, for
Mm.
example, the issues of transfers of funds and technology to address issues of climate change, for instance. Now, if these two countries, these two entities also start wrangling with each other, it'll make multilateralism
Yeah.
even more difficult in its operations.
That's true. True, sir.
So, so while unity in the West is a problem because it it solidifies their hegemony, disunity in the West actually creates more turmoil in the global system in the sense that you the basis of international cooperation is getting eroded even in areas in which uh, Western cooperation, which is based on a positive understanding of what they need to do with the developing world, that will also be that'll also be lost.
Hmm. I want to come to American domestic politics before I come to this part of the world, the Middle East, and obviously finishing up with India. Sir, the American politics is fractured at best, is what we can see. And, you can see these Trump guys running around trying to justify this, that, and the other. But my question to you is simple. There is the MAGA gang, which is now promoting a theory, and quite plausible because there's powers that we don't know about work in the world, that the Minnesota and all that which is happening there is an anti-Trump game which is being played by the UK and the Europeans together. So previously they used to blame China, now they're blaming these guys. So it's an interesting shift. and they're talking about the deep state and this and that. Oh, those aristocratic powers are playing this game. See, they don't want Trump wants to break this whole Anglo-Saxon thing. He wants to go his own way, and this and that. So, how do you see this narrative selling, reality, whatever you may want to term it, as far as the American domestic politics is concerned?
I think American domestic politics has got churned up a great deal in recent years, and it's nothing new. When Trump won his first term, it already indicated a very major shift in domestic politics. But he was constrained in doing what he wanted to do in his first term, uh, though on many issues, anti-immigration and all that, he he revealed what his large thinking was and tried to take steps in that direction. He was also, uh, talking about NATO not being relevant anymore. He was attacking the EU. He was approving the exit, Brexit, etc., etc. Uh, so now in his second term, uh, he has pursued his worst instincts in a sense, and and there's no check and balance left. And this whole immigration thing, which, mind you, at one level has been, from the American public point of view, been positive and is appreciated, is that there is today no illegal immigration into the United States. It's not happening on the ground. And I
Yeah,
think a lot of people on not necessarily the MAGA gang would appreciate that he has achieved that success. However, he's carried that success to the point where stopping illegal migration is one thing, but sending his goons to hound out people in various parts of America who are there supposedly illegally and taking advantage of the US system, welfare system, or whatever it is creating great difficulties on the ground, where certain incidents have taken place. The latest one in two incidents in Minnesota. Uh, so that has created a big backlash.
yeah,
And the problem has been compounded by the fact that the United States is a federal system and the federal governments have certain powers. So whether the state government and the federal authorities will come into more open clash, and what it would mean for the stability of the American political system is becoming uh, an argument of the day. So the point I'm making is that what you're seeing on the ground is a fallout of the obsession Trump has about illegal migration, uh, an issue on which they are lecturing Europe. They're saying that Europe is allowing illegal migration and is changing the complexion of Europe, and Europe will no longer be a reliable partner. Actually, within NATO, we cannot count on Europe anymore because their entire polity and the social system has changed. And incidentally, I'm divagating a bit, but it is relevant also. Besant also says that, or Greece, or Greason, I think Besant, that India has gained from this EU
yeah,
FTA because it has opened the doors to more immigration from India. So they have this immigration obsession, and the lose vocabulary of immigration because the India EU FTA is nothing to do with illegal migration. The mobility agreement is not illegal migration. So what you're talking about, the confrontation that is happening on the ground and the upsurge against Trump's unleashing of ICE against illegal immigration is a domestic phenomenon, and I don't think, at least I can't see why Europe, Britain, or anybody else should be behind it. The dynamics of it is, to my mind, essentially local.
mm. That's what I thought, because it's. I mean, although I might agree with Trump when he's talking about illegal immigration, but The Gestapo style picking up of people is just a little,
Yeah.
it's just a little weird. It's getting a little, in the face. You pick up your criminals and stuff, but you don't pick up, 50-year-old, 60-year-old women on the street and pound them to the pavement and then pick them up. And it's a little weird. So I'm going to
Yeah.
come to, sir, please.
Yeah, no, no, you're right. I agree with you.
I'm going to come to the Middle East, where you see the Iran game kind of unfolding right now, and uh, the the same thing. It's not, which is the narrative. It's not about the oil; it's about the flow of oil that the Americans want to control. Uh, what what do you think is going to happen here, sir?
I think it's a very, very risky situation. And for us, there can be huge problems down the line. Now, he, Trump has gone much too far in confronting Iran and summoning it to give up its nuclear program, curb its missile program, limit the range of the missiles that it produces, and gives up all support to Hamas and Houthis and Hezbollah and all that. In other words, um in other words, um, destroy Iran as a power in the region, because this is what it amounts to. So now, can he step back? And what is the concession that Iran may have to make uh, in order to persuade him to step back? Iran cannot agree to these terms. So if Iran stands firm, then Trump, given the kind of egomaniac that he is, will he be able to live it down? And all that armada that he speaks about that has been moved into the region, does he sort of simply uh, withdraw it? So he has to show that he has extracted something from the Iranian side. Now,
Mhm.
what that can be, I find it very difficult to imagine at this moment, because he's gone far too. His demands are so maximalist, which actually amount to a regime change. Now, what may happen is that he may try to do something like he's done in Venezuela, where he tries to decapitate the leadership. Remember, uh, even earlier when there was a 12-day conflict, he had said that we know exactly where Khamenei is and we can take him out whenever we want to. Now, he could do that. He could do that. He could just try and eliminate if he, the top leadership of Iran, both civilian, political, and military leadership, without putting any feet on the ground.
Mm.
And if that happens, what could be the reaction from the Iranian side? And there are terrible, terrible, terrible scenarios that one can think about. And the worst being mining the Straits of Hormuz and preventing the movement of oil. Of course, that'll hurt Iran itself, it'll hurt China, it'll hurt Iraq, it'll hurt Qatar, it'll hurt Kuwait. All these countries will suffer on account of that. But this is his version of the nuclear option. Now, if that is used, and then in addition to that, the other sort of nuclear option in inverted commas is that in desperation they attack the oil infrastructure of Saudi Arabia and Qatar.
Mhm.
So then what happens? And then what happens to our own equities in this region? Frankly, if you ask me, it, it is it just doesn't make any sense what Trump is doing. In fact, the nuclear deal that was in Obama's time, that was negotiated with Iran, and I had at that time written articles on this, that Iran had accepted something which no sovereign country would accept, the kind of absolutely intrusive inspection regimes. It had, in fact, given up its stock of enriched uranium to Russia to keep. And it was very clear that they had given up their nuclear weapon option, but not given up the right under the NPT to enrich uranium up to 3% or whatever percent that was agreed at that time. But it is Trump who walked out of it. He
Yep.
repudiated the deal. So now, when he takes that no nuclear weapons and he says no nuclear weapons in bold letters in his Truth Social post, the agreement with Iran, the nuclear agreement with Iran, actually meant no nuclear weapons. So he's created a huge problem for himself. And in the meantime, because of totally mishandling Iran, because they walked out of that deal, Iran started upping the ante by enriching uranium to higher and higher levels. Uh, so that's where the problem is. I think Iran can still agree to a fresh monitoring of the nuclear program of Iran and give some uh, give some uh, guarantees that it will not go nuclear,
Mm.
but it will not yield its basic right under the NPT to enrich uranium up to 3% or whatever it is for medical purposes or for other purposes. And in any case, that's part of the NPT. And certainly, it will not give up its the robustness of its missile capability, and its submarine capability, and the very powerful torpedoes that it has developed, which are a great danger to any warship in the Straits of Hormuz.
When we look at this situation, there's no way out. Once you bring in that kind of an armada, it's like you have to use it. So it's I'm kind of waiting for that use to happen, because it's the same as Venezuela. You bring in that many people, you just can't let them float in the ocean for that long. You gotta get them to use. Otherwise, it's a bad situation. Anyways, so finally, India. I think a good play done. Very very smooth play with the European Union, and I think the whole defense deal and this and that was it just hit the mark right there. And this comes at the back of our engagement with Russia in
Mm,
December. Uh,
mm.
Apart from that, the stoicness that Modi Saab has shown with dealing with these cahoots, if I may, of Trump, uh, shows a certain maturity that I don't think a lot of people had in terms of geopolitics. That's my way of looking at it. What's yours, sir?
Well, I think the FTA with the European Union is a very positive step because it opens up a huge market to our goods, especially those goods that are related to employment in India. You know, leather and gems and jewelry and textiles and this and that. Eventually, when the duties go down to zero, then the advantage that we had lost vis-a-vis Pakistan and Bangladesh would have been uh, negated.
Yeah.
Uh, so, so that's a very good thing. Plus, some of the reductions in duties on what Europe wants to sell to India will be in a phased manner. So we've taken care of our interests, and I think the important message in this is that we have moved away from protectionism of
Mm.
the kind that was hampering our growth. Now, when we want to involve the private sector more and more into the growth of the economy and tie up uh, with the international capital and corporations, then you have to open up. You can't say that you will give more play to the private sector and yet have, have economic policies which prevent the private sector from forging partnerships with the foreign partners. Uh, so I think in terms of uh, making India increasingly attractive for for foreign partners uh, all round, not merely in Europe, but this message will go all round. Will be a good thing. It will attract more investment. eventually more technology coming in and this and that. Uh, so, so I think the deal itself is very, very positive. Now, when it comes to the defense part, there is something that we should keep in mind that is Brussels does not decide the defense strategies of individual European countries, especially the big ones. Now, for example, if we have to sign the Rafale deal with France or a submarine deal with Germany, Brussels has nothing to do with it. And if in future we want to develop more partnerships of that kind with major European countries, we don't have to go through Brussels. It is these individual sovereign countries that have to decide how much technology transfer there has to be, and what is it that they can share and not share, uh, etc., etc. So that point is being lost. Similarly, uh, the other thing is that um in terms of the conflict in Ukraine, I think it's a bit of an achievement on our part that despite this conflict continuing and Europe's position is very hardline and becoming more hardline on this issue. And India, on the other hand, is maintaining its strategic autonomy, is continuing to engage with Russia, and we seem to have achieved some kind of a modus vivendi, although the European leaders who came here, whether van der Leyen or especially
Mm.
Kaya Kallas, they have made their usual noises about Russia and Ukraine. But my thing is that if the situation continues to deteriorate around the Ukraine conflict and Europe becomes more and more involved, then what happens? What could be the kind of pressures that are put on India? They already have sanctioned Indian companies, some of them, for breaching the sanctions, European sanctions on Ukraine. So this is a bit of a question mark uh, with regard to this. The third thing is the European Parliament. The European Parliament, after this fiasco with the United States, they have now frozen the ratification of the deal with with the United States. And the European Parliament has a lot of people who think in all sorts of directions that they are uncontrollable. So, in a scenario where the situation in Ukraine becomes worse and Europe gets more embroiled, uh, then how will all this, and if we maintain our ties with Russia as we will, uh, how do we manage what happens in the European Parliament? So that is a bit of a could be a bit of an issue. But I think, on the other hand, since Europe plans to now spend more and more money to defense their own defense, to s- to develop their own defense capabilities, and the budgets that they are allocating are increasing, there is a lot of room for India's private sector and others actually to tie up with European companies uh, to become part of the supply chain, as we are doing with the United States also. We'll be able to do that with Europe. But I think on with America is always more difficult because there are layers and layers of export controls and this and that that operates in the US system. With Europe, it may be easier uh, to handle. And to that extent, we can develop our own defense capabilities and our technologies through this kind of cooperation with Europe. What Brussels can help in this is that the allocations that Brussels has made in terms of SAFE and everything else, those programs they have to develop greater defense capabilities in Europe, India can see if it can benefit from those allocations.
Mm.
But the meat of this cooperation will lie with sovereign countries.
Interesting. And it's going to be fun to watch, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Always a pleasure talking to you and learning from you. These are times of change, and we're going to be glued on to kind of find out where the world goes, because it's
Yeah,
it's it's difficult to place right now.
indeed, indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you, sir.
you.
Always a pleasure. To the audience, please like, subscribe, and comment about any part of this discussion that you liked or you want to add something to it. Please use the comment box and share your thoughts. Namaskar.